Hey everyone, how's it going? Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in. Hey everyone, how's everyone doing on this Saturday evening? Hey everyone, how's it going? Deco's here, about to take his nap. Hey everybody, hey everyone, how's everybody doing? I hope everyone's doing well. Deco's right here joining us tonight. I've got some ice cream. Oh, he's all cuddled up. Got some ice cream, chilling a little bit. Just kind of wanted to answer some of your questions, talk about things a little bit since we're here all in this together, quarantine life. Hey, everybody. So feel free to drop some questions. I figured might as well pop into it. And yeah, talk about what's going on. People are saying, how are you holding up? Hey, Put Out the Project, how's it going? Y'all should check them out. If you haven't checked out Put Out That Project, it's dope art and streetwear. But someone's saying, can we get de Blasio to close the parks, please? We'll see. We'll have to check. I think either way, obviously this is a tough time right now. It's really important that we stay inside, but also people are going a little stir crazy, and you can go for some walks so long as you're social distancing on your walk. Obviously the problem that we're having as a city is that people are going outside and they're not social distancing and they're playing basketball and they're not taking this very seriously. But our city is at the epicenter of this thing right now, New York City, and especially Queens. But all the other boroughs are rapidly catching up. The Bronx, Staten Island, we're getting a lot of cases, and in Brooklyn, Manhattan, all over the place. And there's a lot of people. We need to stay inside, because if we're not getting it, then we're spreading it. And anyone who knows a nurse, who loves a nurse, has a nurse in their family, doctors, hospital workers, they know how overwhelmed so many of our ERs right now with folks. So make sure that we stay inside. But either way, I want to hop in here and see. Look at all these live requests here. Just want to pop in here and see what questions you guys have. It's been a crazy week. We've had, we had the coronavirus package pass this week, and I'll talk to you all a little bit about that. Let me see what we've got going on here. Let's see. People are saying, okay, one question. Will members of the military be receiving the $1,200? Okay, here's how it works. If you are a person with a social security number in the United States, and you filed your 2018 taxes, or you filed your 2019 taxes, whichever one is more recent, and your income is less than $75,000, you will be getting a $1,200 check, no matter who you are. That is what is going to happen. Now, I want to set some expectations, because as many of you know, sorry, I have like this little piece of hair here. Because as many of you know, I was very upset yesterday at what Republicans put in this bill on the floor, because there are good things in this bill. There are a lot of good things in this bill. But relative to what we have done for corporations, it is not even close. Not even close. And so I want to set some expectations about this $1,200. Most people are not going to see this for a month. So you're not going to get a check next week. I'm just keeping it to you all 100%, very real. I want to make sure that I want to answer as many questions about this as possible. So these checks are not coming tomorrow. They are not coming next week. If you have filed with the IRS and you filed your 2018 taxes or your 2019 taxes, this is an important distinction. If your most recent tax return has you at making less than $75,000 per year, you will get a $1,200 check. Now, if you already filed your taxes in 2019, it'll be based off of that. Obviously, a lot of people haven't filed their taxes yet, and the tax filing deadline has been extended for New York and the federal government until July 15th. So if you have not yet filed your 2019 taxes, that is okay. But if you have filed it, it will be based off of that. If you haven't filed it, it will be based off of 2018. Now, here's the rub. If you have direct deposit set up with the IRS, like when you get your tax refund, they don't mail you a check, they just deposit it into your account, you will get this $1,200 first. And you will get it at the earliest 3 weeks from now. That's the estimate that we're getting from the Treasury. And sorry, my manicure is a mess. I just like the rest of y'all. I've been self-quarantining and I need to get some acetone ASAP so I can take care of it, but no matter. So if you have direct deposit set up with the IRS, then you will get that money, I believe, just wired to your account in about 3 weeks. If you do not have direct deposit set up in your account, that check will be mailed to you, and it will be mailed to you in about, at the earliest, 6 to 8 weeks, okay? So we're talking about 1.5 to 2 months. And I know for a lot of you, that is not enough and it's too late. And I want to tell you that I'm sorry, because we fought for so much more, because you deserve so much more. And Republicans in the Senate stripped it, and they fought to strip it as much as possible. Let me tell you about some of the things we tried to get in there. We tried to get it $2,000 recurring plus more per child. And, you know, there are a lot of different numbers. There is 2,000, 1,000, 1,500 plus, you know, more per child, and have it to be recurring and monthly, because that is what a lot of you need right now. But Republicans would not allow us, wouldn't let it in. Trump would not sign this bill if it had more money for people. Trump would not sign this bill if it was recurring for people. And Mitch McConnell would not pass this bill if it had recurring payments for people. Mitch McConnell would not pass this bill if it had rent relief in it, if it had mortgage payment moratoriums in it, if we tried to cap credit card interest rates. That's what I tried to do. I introduced legislation last year with Bernie Sanders last year to cap credit card interest so that they could only charge a maximum of 15%. 15% is already too high, but they're charging, 27, 24% interest. It's criminal. And we tried to cap it to about 15% or 20%. And we tried to get that into this bill. So they would not give an inch. But no matter, what we were able to get was $1,200 and that check. If you have direct deposit set up with the IRS, we're looking at the earliest 3 weeks. If you do not, it will be mailed to you, and that check is going to be about 6 to 8 weeks. That is if you make less than $75,000. Now, I've had people say, what if in 2018 I made $75,000, $75,001, right? Like, what if I'm just above that cutoff? It does not just go from $1,200 to zero. It kind of steps down and it phases down until you're at about $99,000 a year. And then once you start phasing into about $100,000 or so, I'd have to double check. That's kind of, by then you're not going to get money. But it's not just an all or nothing deal. It kind of step ladders down. So that's kind of how that works. We also were able to expand unemployment insurance. So if you are a gig worker, if you are an hourly worker, if you are a freelancer or contractor, you will now be eligible for expanded unemployment insurance for the next 4 months. Okay? 4 months. Again, we fought for so much more. We tried to make it permanent. We tried to make sure that people got more. We tried everything in the book. The most that we could get in that Trump would sign would be only a temporary expansion of unemployment for 4 months. But still, at least for the next 4 months, if you are a gig worker or if you are an hourly worker and your hours have been cut by I believe 20% or more, you are eligible for unemployment. And I am asking you, if you are eligible, please apply for it. Now, a lot of people are saying, I live in this state. I went on the website. I'm calling. It's ringing off the hook. I can't get access to it. Again, I'm telling you, I'm sorry. We have fought for so much more, and you are absolutely right, because unemployment largely is managed by states. So we try to transfer as much funding as we can to the state, but if the state doesn't have the setup for it, which, as we've seen, we've gone from about 218,000 applications for unemployment insurance in 1 week to about 3.3 million. We have never experienced a shock like this in our country's history. And I don't think that a lot of my colleagues, especially a lot of my Republican colleagues, really understand what it's like to work an hourly job and to understand what people are experiencing right now. And so as a result, they're kind of like slow walking this. And the Senate has gone on vacation. Mitch McConnell said, we passed it. I'm out. And they're not coming back until April 20th. So let's see. April 1st is next week. All these bills are due. Rent is due. Student loans are due. Mortgage is due. Credit cards are due. All of it is due next week. And these checks are not getting into people's mailboxes in time. And on top of that, when they reconvene on April 20th, then that's 10 days until May 1st. So we have a lot of work to do, and my request is that the Senate stops going on their little cakewalk that they're going on and get back and do their job, because there's a lot of people that are suffering right now. But anyways, I want to keep going. I want to keep answering some of your questions here about what's going on. Let's see. How does this work for small businesses? So here are some of the provisions that have been put in place for small businesses. There have been hundreds of billions of dollars set aside for SBA loans, small business loans. Now people say, whoa, this is a loan. I don't know if I can take a loan, etc. First of all, I completely understand. We're giving tons of money away to big corporations, but there are some provisions here for small businesses. So you will take on if there are now billions of dollars available in zero and low interest loans for small businesses. You can take that loan, and if you meet some requirements, if you keep your workers on your payroll, if you keep your workers on your payroll for a specific period of time, those loans have eligibility for forgiveness. So it can essentially turn into a grant, and your costs on your rent and your costs on payroll can be forgiven if you keep your workers employed. So there are a couple of other provisions in there. I'm happy to walk through more of them, but that's kind of the top line provision in the bill. So small businesses will get access to zero and low interest loans. There are additional grants in there, about 10 billion, I believe, in small business grants on top of that. If you keep your people hired, then there's eligibility for widespread small business loan forgiveness. So that's kind of what's in this for small businesses so far. I'm going to take a couple more questions on it. Someone said, if you had to guess, when will this be over? Well, it depends on what this means. If by this you mean self-quarantining, it's kind of harder to say. I saw someone tweet this earlier, and I thought it was so funny. They're like, basically, this is like when the class gets in trouble and you want to go out for recess, and the teacher's making you stay inside. And if one kid, and there's that one kid that's like speaking up and getting out of their desk, and so the whole class needs to sit in an extra 10 minutes. That's kind of like what this is like. The more people go outside, the more people act reckless, then the more the virus spreads at a faster rate, and the more we have to be on lockdown. So really, when will this be over? When we all get our act together, from everyday people all the way up to the president. Because there are a lot of things that we need to do, and there are decisions that we can make. There are decisions that we can make that can make this end sooner. There are decisions that we can make that will make this last longer. Right now, the CDC's recommendation has us in self-containment until early May. So that is the soonest, absolute soonest, that I think that we could see end to self-quarantining policies. But again, if we don't get the help that we need, if we don't get the assistance that we need, if people think it's a good idea to start flying around and not washing their hands, we could be in this for longer. So we'll have to see. Looking at some of your things here. Someone said, what are your options if your address has changed since you filed your 2018 tax return? I've been asking the same question. I intend on following up because this is an excellent question. Especially, we're here, we live in New York City, people move all the time. And especially, it's been 2 years, people move within 2 years. Additionally, I also think that this is the whole flaw with means testing. You know what I was doing 2 years ago? I was bartending. And so now it looks like I'm eligible for a $1,200 check. I don't need a $1,200 check. I don't need that. But that was my situation 2 years ago. Likewise, the flip. Someone could have been making more money 2 years ago. Maybe they lost their job last year, or maybe they just lost their job right now, and they need it right now, but they were in a very different situation 2 years ago. First of all, if you're in a different situation 2 years ago, I would encourage you to file your 2019 tax return right now. If you can, go on TurboTax. This is not sponsored content or anything, but go on whichever way that you file your taxes, and file them to update your address. If that option is not available to you right now, I'm going to try to get an answer on that logistically with the IRS. This bill just passed yesterday, so the IRS now has to kind of draft guidance and figure out the logistics of it. So once I find out, I will try to pass that information along to you all. But my recommendation would be, I don't know how the IRS is going to manage it. I don't know if they're going to take 2019 returns that were filed before yesterday, or if they're going to take 2019 returns that were filed up until next week. I'm not sure, but I think it's, you're better safe than sorry trying to file your 2019 this weekend. If you have some time, we're all self-quarantined. Try to file your 2019. But again, if you can't, I'll try to keep a pulse on what happens if your address has been updated since 2018. So I'll try to keep an update on that. So let's see. Someone said, veterans who cannot work / have not filed taxes. So there are a lot of people who may not have filed taxes for whatever reason. Maybe you don't make enough for the threshold. Maybe you were 17, etc. So first of all, if you have not filed taxes or, didn't need to file taxes for whatever reason, you are still eligible for a $1,200 check. The logistics on how the IRS will get that to you is a bit mixed, but one of the pieces of information that I know you can use, one of the documents, is your Social Security statement from 2019, ideally, if you have one. Keep that handy because I believe your Social Security statements can be used to help redeem that check. I'm sure there'll be other ways to do so as well. But keep that document handy, and as the IRS starts to roll out guidance in the next week or two and how they're going to make this happen, we'll be able to, again, update you on that information as well. But pull whatever documents that you have on that. Let's see. Whoa. Someone said, do you support a rent freeze? I'm concerned about making rent for my apartment. I 100% support a rent freeze. In fact, the way that I would look and examine at lining this up is providing a mortgage moratorium and rent suspension. Let me show you how that lines up. And these are one of the avenues that I think we should be able to explore. So one is that if you have a mortgage moratorium, right? Because these are two pieces that work together. If you provide rent suspension, let's say you have a mom and pop landlord that rely on that rent payment to pay their mortgage. So if you just do a rent freeze, then people who own an apartment or who own a building say, wait, if you don't pay that rent, then I'm going to miss my mortgage payment. So one of the ways that I think we could explore making this work out is to hold a mortgage moratorium for, let's say, 3 months, right? 90 days. So that small landlord doesn't have to pay a mortgage for, say, 3 months. You take that 3 months and you pull it out of that term and you basically tack it to the end of their payment period. So if they had a 10-year mortgage, it would essentially become 10 years and 3 months. So they would pay that payment years from now, just tack it to the end of their term. Now, basically, you've created a 3-month window where they don't need that mortgage payment, and you also give them years of liquidity to pay that back. So I think one thing to do is to suspend those mortgages for that period, and then the rents that would be due in that period, you could either cancel or significantly reduce without it really hurting the landlord. Because when you extend those 3 months, years from now, they will have a different tenant and you can just continue signing onto that lease. I mean, I think that there's something to that structure. Again, I know there are a lot of situations with smaller details that could be refined, but at the very least, I think that there should be a freeze or significant reduction, or ideally a suspension. Because if you look at the alternative, right? The alternative is doing nothing. If you do nothing, there have already been millions of people across the country, and this also applies to small businesses, because small businesses, especially in New York City and in our district, they rent. A lot of small businesses don't own the space that they operate in. They pay rent. And so this also applies to small businesses. So let's say you're a tenant, small business, or a renter. The alternative is doing nothing. And so when you say, okay, we're going to do nothing, you just had 3.3 million people who just filed for unemployment, and I can almost guarantee that that number is below the reality because this law just got signed yesterday. So all those people who were working gig jobs, Uber, Lyft, any sort of gig job, any sort of freelance job, photographers, writers, etc. You're unemployed. So you have millions of people who are unemployed. You have hundreds of thousands of businesses, if not millions of businesses, who have been forced to close for social distancing reasons. And so next week, there are going to be a lot of people who aren't going to pay rent. And so if your alternative, if your decision is, I'm going to do nothing, well, there's going to be a lot of people who are not going to pay their rent when the rent is due through no fault of their own. Businesses that aren't going to pay their rent. I mean, Cheesecake Factory has already entered the rent strike, zone, okay? Cheesecake Factory announced that they aren't going to be paying their rent. So the issue that we have if you do nothing is that these tenants are not going to be able to pay. Tenants are just straight up not going to be able to pay. And so then you trigger the situation where now a lot of landlords, mom and pop landlords, won't be able to pay their mortgage. And now the bank has not collected millions of dollars, if not hundreds of millions of dollars worth of payments. And now you have a liquidity problem. So these issues, when they happen en masse and when you do nothing, could have potentially enormous destabilizing effects in our economy. And while I'm really glad that people are getting a $1,200 check several weeks from now, it does not solve that core problem because this issue is going to be around for several months. And we're talking about several months of rent and mortgage payments that are going to be at risk. One of the things that we did fight for, or I tried to fight for, which Republicans also stripped from the bill in the Financial Services Committee under Chairwoman Maxine Waters, is that we fought to make sure that people's credit scores don't get hit in the next 6 months to a year because of this crisis. Again, Republicans stripped that out. Which, by the way, I need to tell you all, credit scores are like a total scam. Like, I sit on the Financial Services Committee. I've done hearings on it. I've read tons of research and reports, documents, books, etc. I've questioned witnesses. Credit scores are set up and they're completely financially incentivized to hurt you. And you all know. And I just want you all to know that this is a system that is set up so that working people are disadvantaged. Because here's the thing. Who reports payments to the credit bureaus? Lenders, right? So lenders can very easily ding your payment and send it to a credit bureau, right? If they ding you for the wrong thing, which, by the way, an enormous amount of Americans have wrong reporting on their credit reports, if the lender puts a wrong payment sends a wrong report to the credit bureau, what's your recourse? You got to write letters. You need to call people. It's such a bureaucratic process for you to get that fixed. But for them to make the mistake, it's almost immediate. It's very easy for lenders to submit reporting that could potentially ding your credit report. And there's very little consequence to that. And so it's very easy for them to submit false report, or not that it's like fraud or anything, but there's just a lot of mistakes in credit reporting. So it's very easy to submit a mistake, very difficult, very onerous process to not fix the mistake. So you have that kind of basic setup, right? But the lenders are the people who report on your credit score. And if your credit score is low, what does that mean? Your interest is high, right? You have higher interest on loans, credit cards, etc. Now, who benefits from a high interest rate? The lender. So lenders really want to make sure that people have not good credit scores, mediocre credit scores. They don't want folks to have very, very low credit scores, subprime credit scores, but they don't want people to have very high credit scores either. And so the whole credit scoring system, the power in that system, is because it's all corporate owned. Equifax, as you know, all of these credit bureaus are private. This isn't even like a public clearinghouse. This isn't even like a public system. And so the whole thing is incentivized so that interest rates are much higher. And if you want to fix your interest score, if you want to fix your credit score, as you may have noticed, there are these things like Experian Boost and like all of these things where you can raise your credit score if you give them access to alternative sorts of payments. Like if you give them access to your cell phone bill history and other kinds of bills, they'll kind of boost your credit score just on that one factor alone. But what have you done? You've given up tons more of your personal information, which is monetized and also profitable. So that's a whole other aside. It's a mess. We need to make sure that people's credit scores are not getting dinged right now, because as you know, this can impact you for years. And this is not your fault. And if you've been laid off, if you've had your contracts dry up, if you've had gigs canceled, and you can't pay bills, that should not be a negative ding on your credit report. So the first thing that I would say to everyone right now is two things. Two things that I would say is, first and foremost, make sure that you call all of your bill providers and tell them that you are not able to pay due to the coronavirus, due to COVID-19. If you just call your folks and say, if you just call your credit card company, if you just call your phone bill or whatever, and you say, hey, I can't make my payment this month, they're going to say, I'm sorry. They may say, oh, I don't know what to do for you. If you say, I can't make this payment this month due to COVID-19, then that's kind of like a magic phrase that opens up a lot of people. They need to know that you cannot pay because you have been impacted. And so if you say that, a lot of companies have internal policies where they will be able to work with you. So please make sure that you do that. I'm looking at some of your other questions here. Just taking a look at some more of your questions. Okay. How does student loan interest work in the credit stimulus bill? Sorry, guys, I've got ice cream here. It's like all melting. So let's talk about student loans. In this bill, student loan payments are suspended until September. You do not need to make student loan payments until September. So that is done. So there's that, but then also interest right now, student loan interest is also suspended. So if you do not, so this is automatic if you are in forbearance or if your loans have been kind of deferred. This is kind of automatic, and it's effective pretty much immediately. So you do not need to make student loan payments until about September. And this is a no questions asked thing, at least when it comes to, and this applies to federal student loans. It does not apply to private student loans. So federal student loans are under control of the federal government, so we can legislate on them as much as we like. Someone said even if they're on auto pay. Now, if your bills are on auto pay, they will likely continue to pay out. So I believe you need to suspend your auto pay with your servicer. But if you continue to pay your student loans, it's not the worst thing. it will be, I believe it'll be applied to your principal. It depends on how your servicer manages it. You know, some of you guys have like Navient, and some of you guys have FedLoan, and other kind of federal student loan providers, and rather servicers. So it depends on your servicer, but you know, if you continue to pay your student loans, you can continue to pay your student loans, but you do not have to pay your student loans until September. You don't need to apply for anything. It's taken care of. But again, go to your website, go to your servicer's website, and look at their guidance, because as we know, some of them play games, so you really need to make sure that you read that fine print and talk to them. But there is no interest right now on student loans. Let's see. Someone said, a 21-year-old in college, I pay a lot for myself, but I'm still under my parents for taxes. Am I eligible for the money? So if you are a dependent on your parents' taxes, that's when this formula comes in, when they say like $1,200 plus X amount for every child. I'll have to relook at the formula. Your parents may be getting that'll be sent up all as one check depending on how the taxes were filed. So short answer is, if you are claimed as a dependent on someone else's taxes, you will not be getting a $1,200 check. I'm sorry. Again, this is why I think that that a lot of this policy should be universal, because it's very difficult for a lot of people to deal with those circumstances. In 2018, there are people that were 17, etc. So make sure that you are talking to your parents. And if that happened in 2018 and you had a shift, let's say you turned 18 last year, or weren't claimed as a dependent, or wouldn't be claimed as a dependent in 2019, go ahead and file for 2019. Again, I can't make you any promises. A lot of this is going to depend on IRS interpretation, because they're kind of saying if you've already filed on 2019, I don't know what cutoff date they're going to be using, but you better safe than sorry. And if your circumstances changed in 2019, I would recommend you just send off your 2019 and kind of make the best of it. See how they interpret it. But again, I'm not entirely sure. Let's see. Someone said, how has unemployment insurance extended? It's a little confusing, not stipulated on the website exactly. I can understand why it's not stipulated on your state's website, because this bill just passed yesterday. It was just signed into law yesterday, so a lot of websites may not yet be updated. Unemployment insurance has been extended in that we are giving more money. So it's about $600, I believe, on top of existing unemployment. And about 90 to up to 90%, I believe, of your wages and salary could be covered. But again, unemployment varies a lot from state to state. So, for example, Florida does not give a lot in unemployment insurance, and so we're talking about money on top of what your state allocates. So it could be very different depending on the money. The actual monetary amount could be different depending on your state and its administration, and so on. But the other form. So first of all, there's going to be more money in unemployment in the average unemployment check. A lot of people can reapply if you've been in that situation and then this hit. There's some changes in eligibility that's expanded. But also, the types of people that are eligible for unemployment insurance have also expanded. So gig workers, if you have your employment from an app, and you have not been able to drive, or you've not been able to deliver on that app, you are now eligible for unemployment insurance. Similar to contract and freelance workers, you are also eligible for that as well. And I believe they will be using your last tax filing information to determine the amount of money that you'd be eligible for. So I'll go on about one or two more questions, and then I'll pop off. Someone said, how many times will the stimulus payment be made? And this is why I'm so, one of the reasons why I'm so upset. The stimulus payment will be made once. You will get one check. One. For $1,200. It's not enough. There need to be more that are made. They're giving way more to corporations and the very rich, because while people say we're giving $500 billion to Wall Street with little oversight, the administration gets to cherry pick how that's administered largely. But it's not just $500 billion, because that $500 billion is going to be leveraged into $4 trillion for corporations. So it's just inexcusable. It's an insane amount of money to give to a presidential administration that is unaccountable, that routinely breaks the law, that has a history of corruption, and operates with a pay-for-play mentality. It's crazy. Meanwhile, working people get one $1,200 check. No payment suspensions, no credit score protection, no rent and mortgage moratoriums. It's wrong. It's completely wrong. And I'm mad about it. And this is a Republican Party. And when people say, oh, it passed the Senate. It passed the Senate because Republicans held the entire country hostage. Republicans said, if Wall Street doesn't get its bag, we will not send money to hospitals. We will not expand unemployment. We will not send out checks. We will not lift a finger for people who are suffering unless Wall Street gets their bag, unless our friends and our donors and whomever gets it, and we're able to pick and choose who gets it. So it is wrong. It's totally corrupt. And I'm mad about it. And I was mad about it yesterday. And I was stomping my foot and waving my hand, because sometimes it just feels like you're just like in this ship with crazy people. You're like, how does no one else see this? How does no one else see that this is not going to be enough for people? But then again, it's for a lot of people, for a lot of my colleagues that I work with in the House, not all of them, but for a lot of them, they have never in their life had to live on a working class salary, like ever. And so they're kind of like, it's like Arrested Development when Lucille Bluth is like, it's a banana. How much could it cost? $10? Like, that's how they act. It's like, they don't know how much rent is for a working person. They don't know. Like, you ask them how much is a gallon of milk. A lot of them don't know. And so, anyways, it's really frustrating, but that's why elections matter. And we're having these problems because of a combination of both people not turning out to vote, but also voter suppression as well. So people being prevented from voting and people not voting. So these elections, they matter. And who you send to the Senate this year matters. So if your state has a Republican senator and they are up for re-election this year, which there are a lot of them, kick them out. Kick them out. We can't do anything so long as Mitch McConnell is the majority leader in the Senate. So we got to get it together as voters and as a larger electorate. But anyways, on that note, I'm going to go finish my ice cream, which is now turned into soup. But I'll see you guys. Bye-bye.
Hey, it's Jacob. Real